Everybody, welcome to Early Season Deer Scouting Part 2. If you have not seen Part 1 yet, that is available on YouTube already, so you can go check that out. Also, if since you've signed up to take this course, we'll send you a recording as well to your private email address, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. Before we get started, just some reminders. If you have any questions, you can put that in the Q&A window. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there and someone will answer you either live over the microphone or we'll type out an answer. There's 3 of us on right now, so one of us will get to you for sure. If you have something in mind and we don't get to it, we're gonna have time at the end also for Q&A, and we'll sit here and answer any of your questions. Also, there's a chat box as well, so if you would like to talk amongst yourselves, feel free to do so, and that way you can answer each other through the chat box. Your microphones are turned off, so don't worry about that, and also your video as well, so just sit back, relax, and take in the info as you get it. But we do like interacting with folks, so if you do have any questions, let us know, and we'll love to go on some tangents. I'm Jason Buckley. Today, the lead presenter is going to be Curtis, and then we also have Dan on here as well, and myself and Dan will be happy to chime in with any tidbits here and there as we move through this presentation. So to get us started, Curtis, go for it.
All right. Well, we like to start off a lot of our webinars just reminding folks how big of a role hunters have played in conservation. And this is worth noting. And for some of you, this is old news, but for a lot of people, it's unfortunate. But you can go through the entire education system and not learn that conservation and natural resources management in North America is almost entirely funded by hunters. They run the entire mechanism. And not only that, it's one of the most successful programs of any type that you can find run at that level. So Australia, for example, and a lot of places in Africa have adopted our conservation strategy directly verbatim because it works so well. And a big part of that is what's called the Pittman-Robertson Act. That's been going since 1937. This is on top of the license and permit fees that hunters are already paying into the system. When they buy firearms, ammunition, some other sporting goods, there's an excise tax built into that that helps fund the whole mechanism. And we can see these charts on the left. It's been a huge success. Even while hunting seasons are going on for white-tailed deer, wild turkey, and waterfowl at a pretty high level, their numbers today are doing exponentially better than they were 100 years ago. And that's hunters have driven that success both financially and through their hard work when it comes to habitat restoration and stuff of that nature. So hunters, big time help out on the landscape. We don't want to forget about that. But now we're going to get into the fun stuff. So early season scouting, we call it fun, but not all of it is fun. There are some aspects that are that can be troublesome. But actually, before we get into that, let's talk about Hunt Camp. This is our biggest event of the year. It's coming up in late September, September 23rd. It's going to be an evening event, 4 to 9 p.m. This is in Wakanda, Illinois. So this is the suburbs of Chicago up there at Deacon's Bar. I think it's called Deacon's Restaurant and Golf Farm if you're searching it on Google, but the address is right there. It's not too far away from you if you're anywhere around Chicago. And if we go to this next slide, you'll get a little bit of a flavor of what Hunt Camp is all about. We have a whole bunch of educational tables set up where you can come through and work on really useful outdoor skills like waterfowl ID, setting traps for mammals, reading maps, setting up trail cameras like we're going to be talking about today. We'll have tables to work on all that stuff, as well as tables for Pheasants Forever and National Wild Turkey Federation and Fur Takers of America, and a lot of the major players when it comes to outdoor and conservation-based groups in Illinois. They'll be there. They'll be there to answer your questions. They can tell you what those groups can mean for you if you join them, and what those groups do for Illinois hunting and habitat. Not only that, hunt camp is all about socialization. It's all about coming together as a big community. Yes, there's going to be food. Yes, there's going to be some awesome prizes, including a bunch of mentored hunts and other really cool outdoor experiences. All that's going to be there. But really, what hunt camp is all about is for one day, let's forget about whether you're a deer hunter, a duck hunter, a raccoon hunter, a trapper, whatever you might be. If you share the outdoors, for this one day, we're coming together as a big community and we're lifting each other up. And if people need help in one aspect of hunting, you can find somebody there at hunt camp that'll be willing to help you out. We're going to have expert dog trainer there, Matt Mercero. He was at our hunt camp the first year. If you've got a new puppy and you're trying to train this dog to be the best hunter in the woods or the marsh, I guarantee you Matt can help you out. And he's going to be there at hunt camp stationed, probably have his dogs and all of his tools of the trade there, and he can show you some of his tricks. And that's just one example of some of the cool things. I don't have time to list it all, but we're going to have the Great Lakes Falconry Association there and have a pretty epic falconry demo. And I don't want to give away too much, but the tickets for this is only $10, all inclusive. If you're around Chicago and you like the outdoors, if you don't come to this, I don't know, man, where you at? Because this is the ticket, man. This is going to be fun. So we hope to see a whole bunch of you there. All right, now we'll get into scouting, and you can go ahead and play this video because it's just kind of designed to set the mood for the thing. But early season scouting is a little bit different. We do need to be aware that it's hot. When I know Dan and Jason were out setting some of these cameras, the temperature is well north of 90 degrees. You got to pack in way more water than you think you need. Because if you're a couple miles away from your car and you're hot and you're dehydrated and you start making bad decisions, that's not a good recipe. And everybody thinks it can't happen to them until it does. So always make sure and bring extra water. Try to stay out of the sun as much as possible when you're walking. And ticks, you gotta exercise your tick prevention. You gotta find them quickly, get them off of you. Permethrin is your friend. Tuck your socks into your pants and look like a big dweeb. It doesn't matter. We all do it. We're all big dweebs. It's much better than getting a red meat allergy that makes you puke every time you eat red meat, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to chime in a little bit, and I haven't even told Curtis and Jason this yet, as I just found out about it this afternoon. But one of my good friends, who's a big deer hunter himself, just got diagnosed with alpha gal earlier this week, and
Ooh.
it is no joke. And that's that kind of alert allergy to red meat that Curtis was just kind of referencing there. So, like he mentioned, the product permethrin. That's kind of the active ingredient. There's a multitude of different brands out there that package it. I highly recommend looking into it and seeing if it fits your method of tick prevention. But if you do use it, please follow the label instructions quite clear. It can be toxic on skin, and so what's unique about permethrin is it's more of a clothing treatment. So you treat your clothes, let it dry, and that lasts for several weeks, especially if it's clothes that you don't wash often. They recommend retreating it after 4 to 5 laundry cycles, but typically with a lot of my outdoor gear, that's in reality a full season for me. So like Curtis said, I just want to re-emphasize, please take ticks very, very seriously, especially as a hunter. That's kind of why we're all out there, is to harvest our own meat. And oh, that would
Oh
change
yeah.
it.
That's no
Yeah,
joke, man. Why couldn't a tick make you allergic to Brussels sprouts or something? You know what I'm saying? Like, come on.
yeah. Also, just to reiterate, the reading the label, the permethrin or pymethrin, it's definitely one thing that it's labeled always says is that it's highly toxic to cats. So that's something. Make sure you store it properly as well. Is keep it out of reach of your kids and your cats for sure.
And another pro tip that I just discovered last year, I left my permethrin just kind of sitting in my hunting tote. That stuff eats rubber away like it's nobody's business. So make
Ooh.
sure it's properly sealed, and probably worth throwing it in a Ziploc bag or two just for some extra comfort, because it will eat through most rubber and plastic, no problem, over time.
Sounds just lovely, but I promise you, it's far better than ticks and these things that Dan was just talking about. Bad stuff, but Now, when we're going out to start scouting, the first thing we need to do, and I know it's hard, my first year ever deer scouting, I was horrible at this because I just wanted to go put cameras out and have fun. And that's all I did because I did not properly manage my data from the get-go. And so it was not useful data. It was still fun. And if that's what you're after, then hey, go for it. But I'm pretty sure you can have fun and make this data useful, and hopefully we'll give you a couple tips for that here today. But what are your personal goals? For every one of us, it's going to be a little bit different. Some people might be looking for concentrations of deer, really good places that they want to set up, and they'll fine tune their location with boots on the ground scouting. Some people are looking for a specific animal, maybe a really large buck, maybe a mature doe, because on your property you want to take the population down, and so you want to harvest more does. But you can also use cameras just to survey sort of the pressure. That's one thing I noticed the last time I ran my cameras. Squirrel hunters were everywhere, and so that really helped spur my decision to go ahead and pull those cameras for a little bit, because I'm leaving them out there for long periods of time, and squirrel hunters are looking all over the trees. And of course, I do know that squirrel hunters are some of the best people in the world. Still, I don't want to trust, game cameras out there with a whole bunch of them walking around. So I pulled them up, and I got that intel by checking my cameras. So outline your goals before the season, and that's going to let you know how to manage your data. Types of trail cameras. Oh, there's all kinds of types. And to be honest with you all, I have not started to use the cell cameras. Once I do, maybe I'll never go back. I don't know. I just haven't taken that leap yet, because back when I got trail cameras, that really wasn't a thing. And now it is. It's a legitimate option, and any place that gets cell service, these things apparently work. And wow, they can really cut back on your gas. They can cut back on your driving time. We all know gas is not cheap. Spending time in the woods, in the tick infested woods when it's 99 degrees, that's not cheap on your body either. That's a workout and a lot of hard things that are going against you. So hey, I've got no issues against them. I haven't tried it myself, but one of these days I am going to give them a try, and I definitely see the appeal there, because you don't have to run out and check your card. It just sends you the pictures right to your phone. You just set them and forget it. Pretty cool. I had Dan, have you ever used these before?
I have not. I've got a lot of friends that do, and they've had, mixed success with some of the brands. But I think as long as you stay with one of the more common brands, and obviously, we don't have a ton of personal, experience with them. But I think that a lot of the big thing is to see what wireless carriers will work with that specific camera, because some of them, especially on the lower end, may be a little limited, and the property you want to, distribute that camera on may not have, that wireless network available in the area. But I also wanted to chime in. We had a private question come through about the legality of using trail cameras on public land. I do want to emphasize that in Illinois, that is completely legal. You can use both the cell phone trail cameras as well as your standard trail cameras on Illinois public lands. There may be some restrictions if you may be, for instance, hunting a parcel of county land or something to that effect. But there are other states. I know Kansas just banned it, I think, last year on public lands. Or Iowa is either recently banned it or is in the process of it. So kind of keep that in mind, that a lot of what we're talking about and using these trail cameras is really geared towards Illinois. And just be cognizant, if you do try to hunt, other states, make sure you check those regulations, because some states do not allow trail cameras on any public lands. So just keep that in mind. But good question.
For sure, and a good point that it could change here at any time too. Because yeah, one thing that I've never even thought about with trail cameras on public land, but somebody, a good friend of mine, brought it up. Legitimate concern. What if you just happen to go to the bathroom and then you look up and there's a trail camera? And so somebody's, got these pictures of you, and that was her concern. And I was like, wow, I guess I never really thought of it like that, but I see where some folks could have an issue with that. So anyway, always read your regulations book each year. Don't just assume it's the same, because sometimes some pretty big things change. But Anyway, when it comes to the non-cellular trail cameras, now you got to run back and forth and either use a viewer, which you can buy that plugs right into your camera and you can cycle through the pictures on scene, or you just pull out the card, swap the cards, and check the batteries and leave them. If you do that, which is what I do, make sure I keep a field notebook and I write every camera where it's at, the location. I I put that same location into Hunt Stand because that's how I save them on a map spatially, and then I write in a bunch of information. I also take a picture of the camera with my phone in case I get back there and have trouble find it. Looking at that picture can help tremendously because if you're out there putting several cameras, it's hard to remember where they all
Yes,
are,
it
you
is.
know. And but keep track of what card goes in and what card goes out. Because if you think you're going to get home and look at the picture and figure out where it's at, oh no. Sometimes the deep woods, you're like, is that a cornfield? And then vice versa. When you just get one little snippet of a picture, it's really hard to tell where you are.
And Jason, you can go ahead and move to the next slide. But one thing I want to add, kind of while we're talking about, whether you want to use a wireless or cellular camera versus the non-cellular. Now, for me, public land, I'm a bit of a cheapskate, so I use a lot of very low cost trail cameras. Towards the end of hunting season, I will look on, Bass Pro, Cabela's, Shields, all these different venues. They always try to liquidate all their current inventory, and oftentimes you can find some really good trail cameras. I know last year I picked up four, I think they were wild game innovations, but they were literally like $29 a piece, or normally they'd be, close to 70. And so I was able to really increase the number of cameras I have. But at the same time, with it being that low cost of an entry, if it does happen to get stolen on public land, which is a concern, and we'll talk through a few options to kind of reduce the chances of that happening, but you're not out $300 like you might be with, some of the higher end cell phone cams. So just something else to think in mind.
Yeah, and then my 2 cents real quick before we move on. I used to work for a company that used cell phone cameras a lot on sites for environmental monitoring. We were looking at a river more than anything, but one did get stolen once, and I think they had trackers on their system too, so they were able to see where it was, and it was like Find My iPhone type stuff. And not only did they see where it went, but also the guy didn't turn it off, so they got video of the guy's car, of the guy's living room, and him hanging out and hang like all kinds of stuff. So the police took that and went right to his house. And then another one would be a more practical use would be we had a coworker once whose camera was about to get flooded out, and he was able to see in real time how close the water was to his camera, and he was able to run in there and grab it before it went underwater. So that was helpful. And then also saying to Dan's point of buying cheaper ones, I like getting like 3 for $100, something like that. And because I think every one of us have had a camera stolen at one point off public land. So anyway, we'll go into that a little bit later. But so those are my two cents on that. So there's definitely pros and cons of the more expensive ones, but they definitely are a pretty penny.
For sure. And don't I wouldn't look past used ones either. If you see somebody posting used ones on Facebook or something, I mean, test them out if they work. But some of them old school trail cameras, they seem to go for a long time. And if you get them cheap enough, hey, they work, they do the job. But where do you hang these things once you get them? This is what people think, do you just go out in the woods and just hang it up all willy-nilly? And no, they need something to walk within the path that they're monitoring fairly close to get a picture. And most trail cameras are going to say they need to be like 10 feet to maybe 50 feet from the subject for a good picture. Now, a lot of them will trigger and take pictures a little bit further than that, but the infrared light source at night won't be sufficient to light that animal up. So you got to be pretty close. So you want to get it on an actual trail. And some of the best places I like to look for are creek crossings, because you also want to find trails that deer are using, but a lot of humans are not, especially on public land, because you're trying to hopefully put your cameras where people don't notice them. And even when people walk by, which I had several people that weren't me walk by my cameras, none of them, at least I didn't get any pictures of them noticing the cameras, and I wasn't missing any cameras, so that's good news. Now I did notice somebody else's camera, And of course, I left it there because I'm not going to take anybody else's camera, but hopefully they got a picture of me noticing it so that they know that I purposefully left it there. But they put their trail camera on a mock scrape in a clover field, and that is the very opposite of what I would do because that's going to attract every hunter in the woods. It was so obvious. You might as well hang up a big neon sign that says, "Hey, trail camera right here," and it looked like a nice one too. So
It's also quite a
anyway,
bit early to be thinking about mock scrapes, in my opinion.
it is pretty early. I guess if you're trying a quick way to confuse bucks and maybe get a picture, sure, I guess maybe it works, but man, it's a good way to attract hunters. So definitely not something I would do. Creek crossings are great. If you can find bedding areas, outskirts of them, get a lot of activity. Later in the year, scrapes and rub lines. Now we're talking probably later in September or more likely October. And pinch points are always good. I'll show one of my favorite spots so far from this year was a pinch point that I found just on Hunt Stand, just looking at the topography and went there, and it wound up being a pretty good spot. So it doesn't always work out that way, but this time it did. And one thing about large areas like food sources, sometimes people will use a time lapse camera on that or set their camera to time lapse. Then it will take a picture just at whatever time you tell it to, whether a critter trips it or not. Um, and that can be great if you're looking at a big food source and you just want to know, oh, okay, there's 12 deer out there in the evening. Oh, there's 16 deer out there in the evening. Time lapse cameras are awesome for that.
And what's really cool about those time lapse, cameras is not only are you, like you said, seeing how many deer are in the field, but what I really appreciate them for is you can see how deer have a very strong tendency to feed through a field in a similar manner, kind of time and time again until they, you know, remove for the most part, the majority of the food in that area, then they may start to shift. And so those time lapse cameras can be really cool to kind of watch this whole herd as they kind of traverse through that field, and you'll start to see how they kind of meander, and maybe they all cling towards one edge that's maybe a little bit shadier. And it can be really useful just to kind of, like Curtis said, watch over a huge food source and just see how they're moving through that specific area and how they're feeding on it.
For sure. Even simple things on time lapse cameras like watching the vegetation grow or go dormant in the fall, because the photos are taken at the same time every day or every hour or whatever you set it to. You can go back and watch a pretty cool video of basically the woods changing on you, which is pretty cool. But we mentioned this before, tips to mitigate theft. Now, if you're setting out trail cameras, I don't care if it's public or private, you can never consider these things to be 100% safe, okay? It's a thing. People sometimes have sticky fingers and they find cool things and they take it. Sometimes it's kids, they might not even know what it is. Who knows? But yes, if you set out enough trail cameras, eventually you're going to lose one. A few things that we like to do here to try to keep from losing them, and these don't always work. It has to work in the area, but using lock boxes or cables, that's awesome because it means the people would have to have a bolt cutter or saw or something to get access. Just setting the camera up high. Carry a set of climbing sticks with you and just set it just out of reach. Doesn't have to be super high. I like to set it just where it's uncomfortable reach for most people on the ground, and that's enough of a deterrent that most people don't touch it. Um, Now, I do usually put a little wedge, and when I say wedge, I mean a stick or two between the tree and the top cleat of the camera so that it's slightly angled down. This picture on the left, I actually had a window right through the canopy of the trees all around in the understory that went out to a food plot, and that camera allowed me to monitor the entire food plot. Every time a deer walked through it, it went off, or coyote or anything, but being that high, it makes it hard to see because most people are looking at the same level for trail cameras. Another thing, just putting them on really big trees does help to hide them a little bit. If you see this picture on the right, that's a pretty big tree. If you're just walking quickly through the woods, that's not camoed or anything, but it doesn't really stand out. When you put it on a small little tree, I notice they stand out a lot more. You can definitely use some natural camo. to hide those, and just pick areas that are away from obvious human trails, away from parking lots. And when you have a several trees to choose from, try not to pick the most obvious one. You may not get the, it may be a less prime spot for pictures, but as long as you get 99% of the pictures, but it's 50% harder to spot by people, I think it's probably worth it for me. Now, data management. So, if you go out and just set up cameras and look at them and have fun, that's cool. If you actually want your data to mean something, label your cameras, label your spots. I like to give them little names that mean stuff to me. So these names wouldn't mean anything to anybody else, but when I say Bobcat Rock, I know exactly where that is because I named it. So it only makes sense to me, but it's a good way for me to keep track of data. And one little thing that I can do is just take all the pictures that I get and really quickly classify them into AM pictures, PM pictures, midday pictures, and then nighttime pictures. And this allows me to have some unique ways to look at these areas. And one thing that stands out is you'll find some areas are really good morning spots. Some areas are really awesome evening spots, and some spots are even good midday spots. So this kind of data, now sure you would notice this if you went out there and hunted enough times, but it's clear as numbers on a page once you quantify the data and actually put it in a table like this. So really pretty useful stuff. And now these three pictures are all, and I'll let Dan chime in. This is one of his honey holes here, but all three of these pictures are taken, you can tell, middle part of the day. And Dan noticed, wow, this is a good buck travel passageway, and they're using it a lot in the middle part of the day. So he might have sat somewhere else in the morning, but guess what? When it gets to be about 10 o'clock, he's making his way over there, and I think he had a pretty decent hunt over there too.
I basically followed that exact model because again, and this is I really like to emphasize midday hunting. If you are following a lot of the hunting shows, whether it's through the TV shows or YouTube or just following different blogs or really anything that has to do with deer hunting, so many people really only focus on hunting that first couple hours in the morning and that first couple hour or that last couple hours in the evening. I have found particularly as rut starts to pick up. Now I'm not doing this early season. I'm not going to sit out, somewhere at noon on, October 1, but on October 31st on Halloween, you bet I'm going to sit through the midday because stuff like this happens so much more than I think a lot of people realize. These bucks, especially those on public land, they start to learn and start to pay attention to what the hunters out there are doing. If they know at like 10:30, the woods become quiet. They're not smelling as much human scent out there. They're not getting bumped around. They're not getting called at. It's gone quiet. And that's largely because at about 10:30, you'll start to naturally see all the hunters leave the field, go back to their truck, whether they go home for lunch or just stay there and eat a quick lunch. But most hunters don't come back to the woods until 1:30, 2 o'clock in some cases. And so there's this huge portion of the middle of the day that these, especially mature bucks don't get mature and big by being stupid. They really do learn from what they experience out there. And so I have found it to be quite common if you can get in an area that you think has active buck bedding. And if you need a kind of a refresher on that, check out part 1 of this because we highlighted some really common buck bedding locations looking at maps and showed a few videos from Jason and I out there scouting in the field. But it can be quite productive. There was actually a study by I think it was the University of Georgia Deer Lab a few years ago. We always hear this that, oh, when it gets hot, especially during rut, deer just go nocturnal. They stop moving. Nobody's seeing anything. Well, they took basically a whole herd of mature bucks. So they had 8 to 10 different mature bucks GPS collared. So they could watch them every single 5 minutes. It sent a ping and they could figure out where their location was and could basically map it. What they found is in the middle of the day, even on hot days, these big mature bucks, does are the same, are still moving now and are still moving about the same amount. the big caveat is they're not covering a vast distance. A lot of what they're doing is in a very small, very concentrated area. And so if you can find little areas like that through your scouting, looking for buck bedding, and then find some trail cameras where you're seeing a bunch of midday activity, chances are that tells you you're in a buck's bedroom. You're in his home turf. You're right where you need to be, and those midday hunts can be really, really productive.
For sure, yeah. You start asking people, you go over to their house, you see a nice mount on the wall, ask them what time of day, and you'll really notice that there's a large percentage of big bucks that are shot in the middle part of the day. It works.
If you could see my camera, that one was 11:15. That one was at about 1:30, and this one we'll talk about in the next slide. It really happens. Middle of the day is by far, through pre-rut and rut on public land, can be very, very productive if you get in that concentrated area where that buck is going to be moving. Now, what I found very interesting was I just showed you those pictures of those two bucks. I was hunting in that area. I expected, what I hoped for was that big, giant 8-pointer to come through. But what happened is I saw a buck I have never seen. I had trail cameras out there the entire season, never got a single picture of this deer. And I think that's what's so cool about these buck bedding locations is they're so consistent. And especially during pre-rut and rut, when bucks are just traveling, they are covering ground, trying to find that first doe. And I think that's what ended up happening. Obviously this was a little bit later in November because it was first shotgun season, but at 12:30, and if you remember, I think, can't recall if this was last year or the year before. Time is weird these days. Jason, you may help because you came out and helped me drag this thing out, but it was like 75, 80 degrees that day, hot as sin. You could see I'm not even wearing camo. I was in the right spot at the right time, and I knew deer are using this escape route out of a ridge point bedding area, which if you need to kind of refamiliarize yourself with that term, go watch part 1. He was sneaking out of the common escape route that all those same bucks used over and over and over again.
Yeah, in the old intro to our podcast, if you go on YouTube, there's video of us carrying him out on a cart, and I'm in a t-shirt. I don't remember
Yeah.
the temperature either, but it's been like
we,
that
we
the past
deer,
2 years
deer
now, I think,
dressed.
where early November has been kind of warm. So
Yeah.
hopefully it knocks it off.
And we had this deer dressed and back at the truck before like 2:30. So I am 100% certain that midday hunting during pre-rut and rut is extremely productive, and give it a try. Don't be one of those who, if you have to go out and get food, that's fine, but try to come back in earlier than most other hunters. And what I have found to be largely the case, especially on public land, is you almost see this, what I call like an increase in activity. If you've ever heard the term a boat bite when you're fishing, when a boat drives by, it causes a disturbance in the water and kind of triggers all those fish to start biting. I almost think deer are the same way. Once all those hunters start pushing back into the woods in the afternoon, you will see a slight uptick in activity. And if you're already in an area that they're bedding in, you're quiet, you're set up, you've been set up for hours already, they're going to come to you just thinking that is their normal, refuge or sanctuary area. So give it a try. Midday can be really, really good.
Absolutely. Cool things can happen to you at any time, so hunt when you can. Whenever you have time to hunt, especially in that prime time, like Dan mentioned, we start getting close to Halloween. That is the prime time until probably about the time the firearm season starts. And all throughout there, if you're on a stand, that's going to give you a good chance to have some success.
Yeah, we got a quick follow-up question on that topic of hunting midday. Do you bring food into your stand with you or just not eat? Yes, I bring food with me. That's kind of one of my favorite parts of hunting is snack time. Not the most in shape guy. I can certainly, hunt and hike my face off, but I've got a little bit of a belly, and that's because I like to eat good snacks. But what I will say is I am very particular about the snacks that I eat. I don't want something, I don't really care what it smells like too much. What I really focus on is the sounds. If it's something like, really heavy almonds that are just crunch, 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 I might pass on something like that. What I really like to do, any food that comes in any kind of wrapper, I take out and put in my own packaging that's quieter, that I can interact with without too much noise. I think that's the big key. But yes, please bring food with you. If you're not comfortable out there, you're not going to last long. And being comfortable, I would argue, is one of the most important aspects of hunting. And I kind of want to revisit that smell concept for, you know, snacks and lunch while you're out there eating. Again, when I'm setting up, I don't use a lot of scent elimination products. I know Curtis and Jason are largely the same. What we really focus on is playing the wind correct. If I know where these deer are bedded, I know the trails I expect them to use, I will position myself in a way that my wind is not going to be any concern. So I can be up there, you know, drinking a cup of coffee, which I do quite regularly, and not really have to worry about the scent because I know it's all blowing away in a direction that I don't expect deer to be or to go through at some point. So just play that wind correct. Use, you know, quiet packaging as much as possible. And the best part about deer hunting is you get a lot of meat yield from deer. My favorite snacks in a deer stand are last year's deer sticks or deer jerky. Makes for a great deer stand snack. But I've also gone so far as to even bring, if I'm in an area where I might get out of my stand for a little bit, if it's really cold, I might cook one of those mountain house dinners, eat really quick, and then climb back up in my tree. I don't think you need to be too concerned about the food aspect. Just make sure you're comfortable and make sure you're well fed. Important stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely a peanut butter and jelly and granola bar eater.
Neat.
And then yeah, and then also going back to scent control, which we're not really getting into on this one, but we definitely give deer some supernatural abilities sometimes. So we've realized that over time, and as you get into hunting more and more, you'll be surprised at how close you can get to them, and especially if you're not after maybe you missed to do your scent control that day, and you see how close they come. You're like, man, do I really need to do the ritual that I've been doing since I was just started, whenever that was. So as long as you play the wind right, you really can get away with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it also is just because they smell something, it doesn't mean they immediately associate that smell with danger. Now, if it smells like you, they've probably smelled a hunter before. They will associate that with danger. But if they smell, you know, a cup of coffee or a piece of chocolate, or, you know, I've even my brother, hopefully he's not watching, he is a notorious smoker. He has killed more deer with a cigarette in his mouth or in his hand than just about anybody I've ever met. So if it can be done with a giant cigarette in your hand, I think you can manage eating a little bit of snack without too many issues. I think, kind of just to reiterate, as long as they don't associate that smell with danger, you're likely okay.
Yeah, the only other point I want to bring up is keep in mind baiting. So, like, I like to bring, you know, apple, something like that. You don't want to get down to the core and just be like, oh, I'll just chuck this to the bottom of my stand, because now you're hunting over bait and that's illegal. So do keep that in mind. Whatever you pack in, also pack out, even if it's food waste, because you do not want to be baiting critters.
And I guess we should kind of expand on this because we get this question quite a bit, so it may pop up here in a minute. So just to kind of, you know, cut it off. But going to the bathroom, especially if you're doing an all day sit, which is what I like to try to do, you know, basically October 31st through like November 8th. Anytime I can get out there, I try to do as long of a sit as I can. Just be comfortable. If you have to go to the bathroom, just go to the bathroom. I mean, there's hunters out here who they find a scrape, and I was this way when I was young. You find a scrape, every hunter tells you, oh, go pee in that scrape. It's going to make the other buck think another buck was there and he's going to get all angry. I've done that and had deer literally walk right up to that pile a few minutes later and work the scrape, no issue. So if you have to use the bathroom, just do it. Make sure you're comfortable out there. Don't suffer. Enjoy yourself, and you'll be good.
Yep, yep. And so we'll just keep going on this time of day. So another thing that we can determine once we have our pictures out there and we make sure that our date and time and all that is set correctly, the picture can tell us which way the deer's going. And we know that in the morning time, deer are probably coming back to their beds. And in the evening time, deer are probably leaving their beds and going to feeding locations. So if you couple all of these camera pictures that you have with your map data that you have, whether you use HuntStand or onX or Google Maps, or you have printed out maps, you can start, okay, well, deer in the morning are heading from here and going to here. and the vice versa in the evening. And you can start to circle areas on your map that you think might be prime bedding and feeding locations. And now the next time you're actually out there, boots on the ground, as long as it's not a prime hunting time, you may actually check those out. Right now in the early season, the great thing about now is you can check everything out because you're not going to mess anything up for the season right now. So feel free, put your boots on the ground, find these places, and yeah, just something simple by looking at the direction the deer are coming and going can tell you a lot about what the deer are doing on the landscape, which is going to help you a whole lot come season time. All right, here's a good example, another really nice buck. Well, look at the time, 1:45. That's an evening time. That's kind of just after midday, but in the fall I would call this evening time. Like this is so early in the evening that you know this is probably really, really close to where this buck was bedded. If you got this same picture at, let's say, 4:45, then it would be a little bit more of a crapshoot where, well, is this really close to the deer's bed or has it already walked a half a mile or a mile or so? So, really good clue when you get it that early in the evening that you may be right about on the bedding area.
And if you watched part one or joined us for the part one of this webinar series, you may remember Jason and I filmed a little short, like 2-minute video where we found a buck bed and put a camera right on that escape route. This happens to be that buck or that escape route coming out of that buck bed. And so, like Curtis said, what that tells me is that deer was bedded literally probably in that bed that we thought. And I was just out there late last night checking the cameras again, and so what I did was I kind of tried to pinpoint where I thought he was walking, because we have an idea for a tree stand set probably another 50 yards down that trail that he was walking on. And so I went and moved one of our other cameras that was a little more unproductive, and tried to, because what I really like to do is if I can get two pictures of the same deer like 15 or 30 minutes apart, that gives me direction of travel. It gives me a lot of really good information on how that deer is moving. And so that's what I hope to try to get with this new camera that we just put, or that I just put out last night, is trying to find another point along that trail that shows consistent travel along that trail. And then hopefully I can figure out, because one thing that I really like to focus on when I'm scouting, especially if you're in an area where you're focused on big bucks. Now, does, this is still important, but the older deer seem to, and it can be an older doe who will certainly catch this, but you don't necessarily want to cross a deer trail that you expect that deer to come down when you're walking to and from your stand. You want to eliminate as much ground sit as possible, because that there will be instances where you'll walk, you may have some residual scent from a dog or oil from your truck or whatever that you're kind of tracking around. And I've had instances where I crossed a trail, a doe's walking down it or a buck, and they stop and put their nose on the ground right where I stepped, and they take off running. And so I like to really try to pinpoint that directionality and get a couple points if I can, that can show me, okay, I can probably walk this way safe because he's not taking this little, off cut trail. He's staying on this main trail. And that can really help you kind of conceal your pathway to your set, because that's just as important as how the wind is when you're set up. Is, can you get there without walking through an area that you expect those deer to come through? Because if you are, probably try to think of another path to get in there, another access route.
Yeah, this is something our rabbit hunters know really well. And I know there's not many rabbit hunters out there, but the ones that are know all about this because that's what beagles do. They go out there and they try to find a place where a rabbit has moved through within the past day. And a good beagle can smell a track that might be almost a day old and follow that until they find the actual rabbit. So, deer can do that same thing. But yeah, this Dan, you were talking about some bedding locations. This is just kind of a review from one. This is an excellent bedding location because look at how the river protects this area basically on three sides. It's a little peninsula of safety. And if the deer have something in the front of that, like a big grass field or a thicket that makes noise, I mean, they basically got a fortress with alarms on all sides.
And you could largely almost call, that field that's directly north across the river that's got kind of these two big fields. There is some timber along that river. That could also be a really another prominent bedding location, because that's key. If you can figure out how a buck is protected from all directions, he may be there. In an instance like this, they're tough to hunt. I will give you that. That will be very hard to try to sneak in there without alerting that deer. But if you can figure out, hey, he's probably bedding in there, then you try to find his escape route, or how he leaves that oxbow or that peninsula, because he's going to at some point, whether he's looking for does, looking for food, working his scrapes, working his rub line. That's the key. If you can figure out how he's leaving a bedding area like this, you can set yourself up in a really good position, especially with the way the wind is currently in this kind of graphic here. And that's what's really important to keep in mind when you're thinking about bedding. They are choosing a bedding location largely based on wind direction. That can really impact how and where they choose to bed, because they want that wind to basically a lot of times come over their back, so they can be in an area looking directly out. They have this strong wind blowing anything that's trying to sneak up behind them. They can smell it from a mile away. Those are the areas to look for. So keep in mind, if you're out there, and I'll just kind of give this quick plug while we're talking about buck bedding or just bedding in general. If you're out there scouting, especially this time of year, and you happen to jump a deer out of its bed, you'll know it'll. Oftentimes they are very strong in their bed. They're very convinced that that's a safe bed, and they may let you get 15, 20 feet before they finally go, it's time to go, and they take off running. If that happens, mark where that bed is. Pay attention to the wind direction of that specific day. Next time, he or she may be right back in that same bed under a similar, wind condition. So keep that in mind. If you're out there scouting and you jump a deer out of its bed, mark it down ASAP, whether it's a map, whether you just take a note, whether you take a picture to give you kind of reference later on, but very, very good to do.
For sure. All data is good data. And this is the apps like HuntStand and OnX are super helpful with this stuff. I just started using it last year, but I can already, it's so easy because you can keep just mountains of data year by year and you can customize it any way you want. So it's easy to find. Definitely highly suggest utilizing those tools if you utilize a cell phone. If not, hey, paper maps still do the job too. And this next slide is going to be a similar bedding location, but where there's not a river to form basically a fortress around the deer. Sometimes it's just topography that can form the fortress around a deer. And so here on this next slide, going to see an example of ridge point bedding. Nope. I think I moved that one a couple. Yeah, there you go. Ridge point bedding. So this is, we'll go ahead and talk about the ridge point bedding since I mentioned it. So the same thing without a river. Topography can do the same thing, and that's because of how air currents move. Okay, so a lot of us have seen turkey vultures or hawks circling in a big circle. They're riding on a convective air column. And basically, when the sun heats up the air on the ground, it rises, which means if a deer gets on the top of a ridge point, it doesn't matter which way the wind's blowing, air currents are going to be coming up that ridge to his nose. So a deer will choose a ridge point like this one here with this wind direction because look at the wind. Anything to the south, especially the southwest of that deer, the scent is getting blown right in his face. But look, he's basically on a heightened peninsula. So air currents are going to be moving up that ridge line basically in almost three directions towards him too. So again, another fortress of protection for deer, utilizing their nose and their ears to hear people or any kind of danger coming from any which direction.
And I really want to emphasize what Curtis said there is thinking about think about the mechanism that causes that rising column of warm air. It's the sun, right? So are we expecting to see a lot of deer using an area like this to bed at night? Personally, I haven't seen that to be the case. If we think back to that kind of midday slide where we showed that kind of escape route of all those bucks, and then I shot that one, that was in a ridge point bed at midday because that's when that rising column of air is established. Now it certainly does start to warm up, in the early morning, but typically I haven't found a ton of bedding activity in these overnight. I see a lot of it largely kind of later portion of the morning to midday to evening.
For sure. Yeah, now we can go to the picture slides. So these are just good examples. AM photos, we've got all the deer coming the same direction, which includes bucks and then also does and fawns. So we can be pretty sure that there's bedding areas for both that direction, or it could just be a really, really good doe bedding area. And if these pictures were taken close to rut, those bucks are going to be checking them out anyway. So knowing the time of year your camera's out is good too. PM photos, same thing. All the deer hopefully heading in the same direction. That can help you to identify what is the prime food spot. Because when deer do first start to move, so they've been bedded down for maybe all day or a good portion of the day, they get hungry. And so the first thing that they want to hit is going to be the prime food source. So wherever you see these deer heading, try to narrow that down. And if you've got multiple different cameras in the same area, it might be that all the deer are heading to the same spot. So try to draw that out on your map. Look at the direction they're heading. Look at any of the trails that you have marked and try to figure out, oh, here's a 3 acre, small standing cornfield that's just covered in tracks. Like all these deer are coming here right now to feed. Or maybe it's a white oak flat, or maybe it's a persimmons tree. Little things like that. If you find some fresh persimmons, fresh apples, chestnuts, anything special like that, sometimes those things can be, oh, just like a dinner bell ringing for deer, and they can come from a long ways to hit a prime food source. So definitely take note of that on your PM photos and try to trace where they're going. They might be congregating somewhere. Now, you're just after sunset photos. This is going to tell you these are all bucks, and this is probably towards the season. So this was not early season scouting. This was last year, I believe. No, actually, this was early season scouting.
Yep, these were just a week or two ago. Yep.
Yeah, these were just recent because I see velvet on that buck now. Oh man, if he just had some length on his tines, this buck would be a monster. He's a really nice one anyway, but you'll see a lot of bucks start to move just after sunset, especially as we get towards season. That may mean that you're real close to their bed yet. It's just people start to say that a lot of the mature deer turn nocturnal once they sense some pressure. This earlier in the year though, this is probably not related to pressure. It's we know which way he's coming from, so he was bedded somewhere over there to the left, most likely, but it could have been a long ways from now because these are obviously dark photos. And one thing that we do want to take into account when we're looking to hunt is don't get too excited about your nighttime photos, because maybe we do get a lot of pictures of this buck in this one location, but if every single one of them is at night, is it really going to be advantageous to go sit there? Probably not. All you're going to do is spook this deer before legal shooting light. So try to figure out, go the directions that this deer's going, and try to find a place where you can intercept him more close to either his bedding spot or wherever he's going to feed. Because yeah, this is not it. It does tell us there's a nice buck there, but it definitely tells us that this may not be the exact prime spot to put an arrow into him. So your doe travel routes, if you go back to your map and you start putting lines on here for the trails you find, and then put arrows on there depicting the direction of travel in either the AM or the PM, then you can do exactly what's on this map, and you can start to color in areas that you're pretty sure are either prime feeding or prime bedding locations. Now, once you've got that information, you've got the travel routes, you've got the feeding spots, you've got the bedding spots. You now have all the information needed to be the best hunter you can be. So every single day, you look at the conditions, you look at your maps that you have like this, and you try to figure out what would the deer be doing under these conditions. Look back in your notebook. What were they doing? Look at my cameras. We had similar conditions on October 15th. Look at your cameras. Which cameras were getting pictures on October 15th, which had a similar wind to the day you're hunting? All these things can help swing the success in your favor. And we talk about this all the time. A lot of times new hunters look at where, how you select where you hunt, and they think it's all luck. And there certainly is some luck that plays into it, but we've all heard the expression that luck favors the prepared. And so the more work you put in, the more things you swing in your favor, the luckier you're going to tend to be. And that's just the way it works. And yeah, just so remember, when you find good doe areas during rut, these now become good buck areas. So even if you're strictly buck hunting, you don't want to shoot a doe, you still need to list all the doe stuff, because as soon as it gets close to Halloween, that special scent is in the air. Um, Doe spots become buck spots. Always pick a spot just downwind of prime doe bedding locations, and hey, you're in a spot for an all-day sit right there.
Absolutely. And if you were to set up on the downwind side of that bedding area, Halloween through November 7th or 8th, I can almost guarantee at some point during the day, it may not be when you're there is going to be bucks that walk the downwind side of that bed. It is just that consistent because they like to find areas that they can basically scent check as many deer as possible. And if you think back to part one, we kind of really emphasize that does like to bed in family groups. Bucks are largely solitary when they're bedding. Does are the complete opposite. They want to bed in numbers. They rely on the many eyes, on many noses and many ears, out there looking for danger. And so he can just get on the downwind side of that, and he may be able to check a dozen, 2 dozen, depending on how big that specific bedding area is, and just all check. And boom, are any in estrus? No. If not, he's going to continue his path, and he's going to go check another bedding area and another and another and another. So like Curtis said, so many people emphasize buck beds, but come Halloween, that's when I'm reverting back to basically trying to harvest the doe. If you think about it that way, hunt where the does are and hunt where you expect the bucks to try to be able to smell as many does as possible.
It's like speed dating for deer, the buck just walks by, sniffs the air. You
I
go,
like that. I like
nobody's
that.
ready here. Go to the next spot. All right, another really simple thing we can do with this data is just compare locations. Maybe after a while, you've got your cameras out at a bunch of different locations, you get enough data, you can start looking at, and you can break this down any way you want to. I looked at it at just deer per camera trap night. And so just a camera trap night is just one trap being operational, or one camera trap, I should say, being operational for one night, meaning one day and night. So one 24-hour period. And if you add all those up, you can get some numbers to help quantify your areas, and you can look at them in a glance and just say, oh man, well, I'm winding up seeing a lot more deer at the Eagle Bluffs area this year than I am at the Red River Basin. And that can inform your hunting decision. You can do this same thing with buck to doe ratio. Maybe you're just looking for a buck, and maybe those numbers I didn't include that in here, but maybe the numbers are reversed. So maybe you're seeing a lot less deer at Red River Basin, but then you look at the buck to doe ratio, and maybe there's 2 bucks per every doe, whereas Eagle Bluffs might be 3 does per every buck. And so a lot of different ways to look at the data, a lot of different ways to inform how you may hunt. But it's basically, it's a lot better than just taking a stab in the dark and being like, yeah, well, I feel like I should go here, I feel like I should go there. Not saying don't trust your instincts, but it sure is nice to have some numbers to back up those instincts sometimes. And that's what, if you manage your data properly from the beginning, that's what trail cameras can do for you. And this is kind of a way to look at relative abundance. We can know if somebody's just trying to get a deer, go to Eagle Bluffs, or Busey Woods. And if the person at Red River Basin might see less deer than the folks at those other places.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a little bit, Jason, since we're kind of talking about, managing data before we move on to some of the other sections here.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Just for a
Can you
time
see?
check, it's at 8 o'clock.
Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
So there's a couple different ways to manage your trail cam photos. This is how I did it for a long time, whether you use Apple Photos, whether you use Google Photos, whatever, really any photo library works. But what I really like to do is to take a screenshot of some kind of satellite imagery of where that individual camera was, just to give me a little bit of reference when I come back to it. Because at some point you'll get to a point where you just have a folder like this, where you have pictures from who knows what camera, who knows what year. Maybe you didn't set the date right. Maybe these are just, a collection of random pictures that you wanted to keep. You don't know. And so being able to just quickly refer back to that, have a nice little aerial imagery that shows about where that camera was, and it can really aid you in that process. But since we're kind of moving on in 2023, there's a few technological advantages that have come out recently. This is Onyx. I know a lot of people have probably used Onyx for quite some time. You can see this is kind of what my standard hunt map looks like. I fill it out with everything I come across out there. But they just recently announced a new feature that they call Trail Camera. And what's really cool about this is you can embed your photos directly into Onyx now. And so you don't have to have multiple different applications to basically store your cameras, to store all your data points. It's all right here. Now, I personally don't use Hunt Stand. I have used it in the past and it works fantastic too. They also have a trail camera photo management system built into the app as well. But it's a really nice way to, again, just have everything consolidated in one specific area. And what I particularly like about the Onyx feature is you get some data about the SD card, about the batteries, and you can start to monitor how long the normal battery life for that camera is. So right now, these trail cameras have been deployed for almost a month. I just checked them, last night. They're still well over 3/4 of a battery, but it tells me how many batteries I need. So if you're running like me, I just have a plethora of different brands and models. I don't really have a favorite. I just, like I said earlier, buy whatever's cheap. And so being able to quickly check, what kind of batteries do I need? Does it have an SD card? How big is that SD card? That's really valuable stuff. And what I also like is being able to pinpoint what directionality that camera is facing. If we think back to some of those cameras or some of those photos we showed, especially the early morning, you could see a lot of sun coming through that, and that can really obscure your vision if maybe it's the one time that deer comes through that you've been looking for months and you just don't get a very clear picture of them. So I really do like this tool. It also allows you to go back in time and you can see where you've deployed that trail camera in recent years, but just a really nice way to manage all your data, have it all in one place, be able to click through it, interact with it, see when your photo was taken, see what time. Really good stuff. Now, what a few caveats that I've noticed, this feature just launched like a week or two ago, so still kind of new. One of the big things, the big issues I ran into is when you take batteries out of a camera, it normally depletes the battery enough that you have to reset the calendar and the time. Some of the models I have, you don't have to. Some of them you do. I didn't catch that. And the really unfortunate thing is you can't go through Onyx and change the time of that photo or date. Once it's kind of locked in, it just pulls that metadata that's already embedded in the JPEG file. Now you can use a metadata editor on your computer to kind of adjust it that way, but a royal pain, that's a process. So just always make a checklist and always check that time and the date to make sure those are set properly. But moving forward, they had a press release that came out, and I know HuntStand is doing a similar thing. they are going to start using some AI to start detecting individual deer or being able to detect whether it's a male or a female, and really start to some of those analytics that Curtis showed. It's going to start to do those things for you. Again, those features aren't live, but it sounds like they're coming relatively soon. Another really cool thing about the Onyx, again, I don't personally have any, but if you have the cell phone cameras, you can actually have those sent directly to your Onyx account, so they don't have to go through, that specific app that that camera manufacturer uses, or you don't have to, mess with a card reader, plug it into your computer, and then throw them on Onyx. So if you do use some of those cellular models, it looks like in the next couple of months, whenever that feature launches in Onyx, you can just have them sent directly there.
Cool, cool. Dan giving away all his private
I
hunting
know, I
deals right
know.
on the World Wide Web. It's good stuff. Good
It's all
stuff.
public land, man.
True, true. All right, we'll get back to where we were here. We got just a little bit more here. All right, think outside the box and have fun. This next slide, we can go on. Go ahead and play this video. Swash is the best way to get down here. Got some good trails all coming. It's a little skippy topographic funnel. This is a good example of a kind of a different trail camera placement. Normally would never put them this low on a tree, but because of the slope of the ground and the trail going here, crossing this little creek, and then going up that way, actually really low on the tree gives me the best angle, which sometimes just changing up the height on a tree can make it where trail cameras are harder to spot for people walking by. Especially real low, I feel like they're hard to see. Now that actually was my best camera placement, and it looks silly. It's on the bottom of the tree, which you will never see a diagram telling you to do that. In most areas, I would not recommend to do that. But because it was on a slope, that just happened to be the perfect spot. And having it that low on the tree, I walked around it, and really there was only very few places you could stand and even see that there was a camera there. So I was pretty happy with that placement. It's one of the weirdest ones I've done. I don't know if I've ever put one that low on a tree before, but it did get my pictures of the best bucks. And if you remember that panning that it just showed, you'll see in some of these pictures coming up that that exact shot is going to be in the picture, because this is where I got most of my big bucks at. So pretty cool spot, and a good example of think outside the box and use what Mother Nature gives you. And if it looks silly, hey, it's only silly until it works. And I left this and I took the video thinking, this will be a silly video to add in, and then I wound up getting some pretty nice bucks here. So it really wasn't that silly at all. And here they are. This is all that spot. So that big uncoordinated ape in the top left, that's me trying to traverse up the hill. The deer did it much more gracefully, but I was pretty sure that was the main trail that these bucks, or I should just say deer, were going to be coming up. And this is the best way to get down to the Illinois River, and then to get up to the top. So I found this a topo funnel just by using hunt stand. Went down there, sure enough, boots on the ground proved it was a good spot. Not only is it a good pass through, but the deer spend a lot of time in this area because it's the last flat spot until they have to go uphill, several hundred yards uphill at a pretty steep incline. So they kind of take a break, regroup, and then go up the hill. So this is not only a good pass through, we've also got bucks out during the daytime. It's pretty early, but it is during the daytime. It is shooting time. So this could be an excellent hunting spot as well. And yeah, got a couple nice bucks, including the one with the drop tine there, which was the nicest one I saw. That was in a bachelor group of 3 deer. The other 2 bucks were a little bit smaller. The 8-point is down in the bottom right, and then there was even a little smaller 8-point behind him that I didn't throw in here just because these 4 pictures took up all the space. But that was that spot with that really, really low camera. And when you look at these pictures, does it look like the camera's really low on the tree? No. It's just that's the way the topography sat, and the deer wind up being pretty dang centered. So yeah, nice public land buck there with the drop tine. That's going to be probably my main target buck until I find something more interesting. And so we'll see. Join me this year in my quest to try to get within about 25 yards of this beast.
That's such a cool spot, and it kind of reminds me of a spot. Can you go back to that picture just for a second, Jason? That I hunted quite some time on Illinois public land, and are there a lot of oaks on that slope?
Oh yeah, a lot of white oaks, some red oaks too. But yeah, it's a good oak ridge.
Nice. And what I have found, particularly on, because that looks like a fairly steep slope just from looking at the pictures. What I have found a lot in cases like that, a lot of times those acorns don't just fall and stay on the slope. And I have found more often than not in little washes like that, you may find a nice concentration of acorns as they just kind of slowly roll down that hill when they all start dropping. And you can often find a little concentrated feeding area just because there's such a dense, concentration of these acorns as they kind of fall and roll down the hill and just kind of concentrate in that little wash there.
For sure, yeah, and watch out for them little marbles when you're trying to walk up that steep thing. Let me tell you. And I just want to point out, look, my socks really are. My pants are tucked into my socks.
There you
I'm
go.
not, I'm talking what I preach here. I'm out there looking like a dweeb, so I'm doing my part to try to stay tick free.
I just assume that was some nerdy bird watcher walking by.
Oh yeah, it was that too. You can't see my binos; they're on the front there.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Curtis and Dan, for running through that. And just some updates for our fall events. We do know that deer season is coming, so we're trying to get our workshops on the schedule. We'll have some more as we get some other locations ironed out. But for right now, you can go right now and register for these events. They're all over the central and northern part of the state for right now. And Horseshoe Lake is far central south as we go right now, but we're looking around. So yeah, so check those out. Curtis in the very beginning of the presentation mentioned Illinois Hunt Camp. We have links to that. Pheasants Forever is housing that web link to sign up and register for that event. So you can go to our Facebook page. And then there's also a website, which is illinoishuntcamp.com, Curtis.
Yep, www.illinoishuntcamp.com. That's got all the info about Hunt Camp, including the ticket link. So just don't forget that. Tell your friends. Hope to see a bunch of you there. This other
And
stuff's
awesome.
good too, though.
yeah, and before we move on, I do want to mention the Illinois Deer and Beer Fest is this weekend in the Bloomington area. We will be there Friday through Sunday. We'll have a nice booth that supposedly is going to be right in the entryway, so you should be able to find us pretty quick if you want to chat or have any questions. We'll happily, talk about some maps and stuff. We're also doing a few seminars on Saturday, so if you're, looking for something to do this weekend, check out the Illinois Deer and Beer Fest. It sounds like it's going to be a great event. I've looked at some of the seminar schedule. They've got that thing quite packed with some decent names. So it should be a really fun event. Looks like there's going to be a lot of vendors there, lots of giveaways, lots of gear, lots of information, lots of education. So check it out.
I don't want to let the beaver out of the bag, but we might even be bringing some of our beaver sticks. So
There might be some tasty treats along.
yeah, if you
There you
want to
go.
try what masterful work that Chuck, our friend at River, what's it called?
Riverbend Wild Game and Sausage Company.
Oh yeah, they do some awesome stuff, and these beaver sticks are primo. We brought them to our trivia night, wildlife trivia night here a little while ago, and man, they got snarfed up
They
pretty
went
quick.
quick.
Yep. And then Curtis and I are going to be recording a podcast tomorrow, and the topic's going to be small game. So if you're interested in going out small game hunting and haven't been out before, we'll be discussing a little bit about that and some of our favorite memories of small game hunting. So we'll have that come out in the next week here. So that'll be found on our YouTube channel or anywhere you can find podcasts.
And it's about time. It looks like once this little heat dome expires, the end of this week, it's already looking like next week we're getting back into, some 70 to 80-degree days, and it's time. It's
I'm
time to
ready for
chase
that.
Yeah,
squirrels.
them squirrels are cutting hickory nuts. I'm telling you, people are. I know it's hot, but there are folks out there getting after them. And as soon as that temp falls a little bit, I think I'm going to be tempted to be one of them too.
Same, same.
Mm-hmm.
Not
And
a
then
better
again,
way to take out than with a shotgun or a 22 tagging along as you're trying to find some squirrels.
I know, I think I'm gonna take the dogs for a walk too, walk on the shotgun too. Yeah, and then again, all of our social media and our webpage that are available. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll stay around for any questions. Other than that, thank you all for joining us this evening, and we hope you have luck out there. If you're getting out for the first time or have been out for a while and just want to learn a little more about scouting, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, hopefully you all appreciate the fact we showed you our real buck pictures. A lot of people keep these things secret as can be. These are our real pictures, so real animals out there.
And if somebody in here happens to harvest one of those, send us pictures.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
trust me, we will be happy, happy, happy for you.
Oh yeah, they're not our deer, but we would definitely like to see pictures and maybe get to try a deer stick or two.
Yeah, I think Dan knew the woman who that one going back. I can even go back right now real fast, but that real large buck that you had midday. I think you knew the woman who got this one right, Dan, on public land. This guy in
Yep.
the
And,
middle.
and and I think that's the real cool thing about public land, and especially in areas, where we live, we don't have a ton of public land. Well, I mean, that's pretty consistent across the state for most people, but you really start to learn who the other hunters are that are out there. You start to learn what they're seeing. You start to information share. I think, some of us so many of us are stuck in our own little silos, and my whole hunting experience completely changed when I threw that out the window. I grew up bass fishing. That was my dad and my family's hobby was tournament bass fishing. So I grew up with the mindset of, oh, what are they biting on? The end of my line, and that's all the information you give them. But what really changed the way I hunt is just being open to having conversations in the parking lot. Now, I'm certainly, if I'm walking in the woods and I see a guy in a tree stand, I'm not going to walk under back, hey, what are you seeing today? But if I happen to see someone in the parking lot, I'm more than happy to information share. And I might not say, exactly where my tree stand is, but at least a rough idea. Not only does it allow them to know where you are so you can kind of avoid each other and give each other space, but there's some really good information sharing that can be had by just talking to other hunters. Now, you never know, you may not get the most accurate information, but I have found largely most hunters, especially public land hunters, are good people. We're all out there trying to do the same thing, and we're all trying to do it with a limited resource. And so having those conversations and information sharing can be huge. And that's how I knew this deer was shot. I knew about, within 2 or 3 hours that deer was shot. Okay, now I move on to another area, because that was kind of the only buck in that area. And turns out when shotgun season came around, a buck I hadn't seen ever just happened to show up. So information sharing is good, and I'm a big proponent and a big fan of it.
For sure. Try
Nice.
to talk to other hunters and even trade numbers if you can. If they're friendly, not everybody's going to be friendly, but deer hunting, just imagine if Dan, if you would have shot this big buck way out there and you had no help.
Right,
At that
right.
point, you're really wishing you had the number of some other people out there because for the most part, they'd be happy to come and help you drag a deer if you're going to do the same for them. Because we all need help every once in a while. It's much better to be friendly, be allies, than to be working against one another. You're going to be happy that you got a friend. Once you shoot, it might be just a big old doe, but you have to drag that thing about a mile and a half out. You're going to want a couple friends.
Well said. And you might
Yeah,
make a long-term friend out of it.
you might for sure. And then my 2 cents on that one would be the best conversation I had. It might have been a season ago, but was I chose to leave my stand overnight. You're allowed to at the site I was at, and I chose to leave my climbing stand at the bottom of a tree overnight. So I'm like, okay, I'll be back tomorrow morning. Like, no, and I'm gonna get here way early, so not like I'm leaving it at dark. I'm gonna be back in the dark. I'll come and get it, and so it won't get stolen or anything. And it was the very first time all season that I walked out, and there was a guy literally 20, 30 yards. He was on the other side of the trail, of the horse trail out there, and he was already in his stand. And I'm like, I went up to him like, dude, I'm sorry to walk right up to you, but this is the first time I left my stand. It's right over here. I'm gonna grab my stand. I'll get out of here. And he's like, oh, no worries, man. He's like, I can't believe you're out here. I'm like, I can't believe you're out here because we're both so far away from the cars. And I never saw his face, but he was like, dude, if you get one, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna go down. I'll get off this ridge and I'll go down to the bottoms and hang out down there for the morning. I might come back in midday, see how you're doing. And he's like, yeah, if you get one, come back and get me. I'll glad to help you out. I'm like, oh, thanks,
Nice.
dude. I don't even know what the guy looked like. I'll never be able to
Yeah.
identify who that was, but we had like a great conversation at 4:30 in the morning, a mile and a half away from cars.
And I've honestly, I've had several people help drag out a deer. And now we did get a really good question that I think is worth bringing up. Is solo deer hunting practical, or should you always have someone either with you or on call if you harvest a deer? I'll kind of go first, and then I'll kind of let Jason and Curtis kind of give their input. I am primarily a solo deer hunter. Um, the vast majority of my deer hunting experience, especially I started hunting a little bit later in life. I didn't really start deer hunting until I was, junior in high school. I didn't shoot my first deer until I was about 17 or 18. When a lot of people start when they're, 12, 13, they've shot big deer their whole life. It's normal to them. But my experience was completely solo, and it does add a little bit of challenge and fitness to it, but there are certain ways that you can go about it that make it a little more practical. I'll give a few of my tips here. One, invest in a deer cart. If you're going to be hunting public land, I highly, highly recommend investing in a deer cart. You don't have to get the most expensive one out there, but get one that can support, a 250-pound animal pretty easily. That will change the way you hunt. Number two is hunt in areas where it's going to be conducive to get a deer out. There are plenty of areas where I know there are deer that live, and that I could go in and probably shoot a doe with not a ton of tree stand time, maybe one or two sits before we finally connect, that I will just largely avoid because I know there's areas that are a lot easier to drag out a deer. Now, if it's a big buck, kind of like this one in the picture, I might be a little more optimistic about going in there and having to deal with an animal, because again, it is, a big buck for lack of a better term. But I really am cognizant of where I hunt, and that's always in the back of my mind, is how can I get a 200, 150-pound carcass out of here without too much effort. And a deer cart is a great option. If it's snowing on the ground, I also will take a deer or a snow sled, just a cheap plastic one. I also have one that I use for duck decoys, so I'll just take that along. I can throw the carcass in there and it'll slide right along that snow. You can also do that if it's not snow. It's a little more friction, but the deer carts are great. And one thing I discovered last year when I pulled the deer out by myself, it was middle of the night, was don't pull the deer cart. I've always historically just put my arms behind my back and just walked forward with the cart behind me. I have started to push it like a lawnmower, and I have found that to literally be 150% easier. I don't know if it's the way the weight is distributed, or if it's just allowing me to put the pressure on like my waist instead of having my arms have to pull everything, or you can use a lot more of your upper body. So that's another option, is push the deer cart. Now the
That makes
third
so much
option,
sense, dude. That's not how
hey,
you use a wheelbarrow.
yes,
And I don't,
yes,
I'm today years old realizing that I
I
should have been
know,
pushing my
I
deer this whole
know,
time.
I know. I'm like, how has nobody taught me this before? But yes,
Yeah,
push
that
a
makes
deer
sense.
cart. Don't pull it, push it. Another really good tip is if you're in an area where you expect, excuse me, where you may have a 2-hour drag ahead of you, excuse me, sorry, you may want to take the next step and go ahead and quarter and dress out that animal to allow you to take it out in portions. So it's very similar to what they do in the Western style of hunting when you're out, elk hunting, and you're 15 miles away from your car and you have to get this, giant elk back. How do you do it? You cut it up into pieces. Now, that is allowable in Illinois. Two things to keep in mind if you want to go that route. One, you need to take everything with you. You can leave the gut pile, everything else must go. Out west in a lot of those states, you can leave a lot of the bones, you can debone some of it, you can leave the big rib cage, you can leave the head, you can leave the hide. Out here in Illinois and most Midwestern states, if you're quartering a deer out, every single piece of that carcass needs to go out with you. But you also have to have proof of sex on that carcass. So if it's a male, leave a testy attached to one of the rear quarters. So when you're field dressing it, just don't take off the entire testes and scrotum. leave one of those still attached to that quarter, so that if a CPO does come across you, he can say, oh yeah, that's a buck, or that's a doe. So leave proof of sex on that animal. But you don't have to hunt with everybody. I know pretty much all three of us, we coordinate and we'll talk, hey, I'm going to go out there today. Yeah, yeah, give me a call if you shoot one. Oftentimes, because where we hunt, typically it's 45 minutes to an hour drive anyway. And a lot of times, by the time somebody from town could get out there, I would already have that carcass 3/4 of the way or almost all the way back to the vehicle. And a lot of times I just kind of do it solo. So it is certainly practical, but I'm glad you're thinking about that, because that's one thing we've been a big proponent of ours, is to prepare for the harvest. This whole webinar today has been preparing for the hunt. How do we scout? How do we use trail cameras? But you also need to prepare for that moment when you do harvest the animal. You don't want to go out there and say, crap, I've got a meeting at 7:30. Sunset is at 6:15, so I can probably still go out, and if I shoot one, I'll try to get it quick. Don't do that. Try to plan and make sure you have enough time, because these animals are tough, and especially if you're archery hunting, you may have a full night ahead of you. There's been instances where I've been tracking for 3 or 4 hours. So just prepare that entire kind of headspace for that harvest. That's, how do I get the animal out of there? Do I have enough time? Do I have anybody that can help if need be? But you can do it completely solo. Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer there.
Yeah, that was a great response, Dan. And I'm trying to remember all of the points I thought of while you're saying it. Basically, don't be afraid to call people who aren't hunters. I mean, I have friends who may not hunt, but they're willing to come out and help me pull deer if need be. Also, it's for safety reasons. I mean, it's always nice to, if you ever go hiking or just being outdoors in general, let someone know where you're going and when you expect to be back. So if you have anyone that you can text, even if you don't know any other hunters, like you can text a friend or a significant other or family member and let them know that you're going out. That's always good to do. And then I don't know the last one I was going to say, but yeah, the farther and farther we're getting out, you'll be surprised at how hard it is actually to pull a deer out of the woods. And so having that luck, and also look up, if you're really going real far out, look up quartering your animal, because I think that is a big help, especially with some of the areas that we're looking into doing this year. We've had friends in the past get deer in the same areas that we're going in, and they've quartered their deer out to get out. So I think it's going to be an option for us, depending on how big some of these bucks are that we're getting on camera. If we get one of these guys down, it might be a pretty hard walk out. But so make sure you kind of look up on that, especially where you're going. Also, it might not be, if you're out hunting, and it might not be worth shooting a little doe at dark if you're 3 miles away from the car. I mean, weigh your risk versus reward on that, and see if you're willing to spend a whole night out there, and the walk back and everything else. Depending on what time of year it is, if it's late season, maybe it's worth it, but early season, you might want to make that one go. But that'll be stuff you pick up along the way.
Yeah, there are plenty of times where I'll just pass on a deer that is easily in my range, and I'm out there just to fill the freezer. And for whatever reason, maybe I'm just not. There's honestly times where I'm just not in the mood to deal with it, and I'll just pass on a deer that walks by. I may be sitting there, I turn cranky, I get an email or a text that kind of sets me on. I'm just not in the mood to deal with it, and you just sit up there and enjoy watching them.
Yep. All right. Any other questions? That was a good one. Any other ones, and then we'll get out of here.
Don't think so.
All right.
Cool.
Got
Well,
the
thanks.
duck waterfowl drawing open, just a reminder. So if you were interested in ducks or geese, right now is the resident portion of the drawing. So it's free. Just got to sign up.
Yep. If you have any questions on that, you can find us on Facebook. You can shoot us a message on any time about anything, anything hunting related. We'll be happy to help you out and figuring out any tips and tricks that you might need to know with the different lottery systems or finding places to hunt. So we're here as a resource for you all. So don't be afraid to use us. So with that, we'll see you all later, and thank you all for coming.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you at Hunt Camp, September 23rd. September 23rd.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.